She says she speaks to God.
That it's like a voice that comes into your head, or like a person that, holds your hand and says, here's the secret of the universe or anything.
I think you were 8 when you had a vision that you would get married to an enlightened person. For the generation where people want to explore their life freely.
So it's like everything that people are usually attached to, or they have curiosity or desire for, it's like those desires never attach themselves to me from early childhood because I had my connection to something much higher. We've conducted 6,000 science experiments. Everything that conventional methodologies, conventional science and medicine has found limitations, we've been able to address those and find real outcome, real solutions with our science experiments. We've been able to increase yield. When they're struggling with this type of yield with all these chemicals, we increase yield by as much as 500%. We change the soil microbiology by just blessing a plant or a seed.
This sounds like more of magic to me. It's science versus God. From years we have seen they do not go hand in hand.
At one point in time, they weren't always separate. 50%, it's the greatest number of people that are not involved in religion at any other point in time in history. More people are leaving religion than ever before because they trust science. Religion says God is omniscient, but again, unable to take it and put it in the laboratory.
In order to give a blessing, I don't believe in this, you have to be enlightened because we get blessings from our mother, from the priest. So what are these blessings then? Are these powerless? Hello everyone, Namaste, welcome to the Raavya Sarda show. Our guest today, she grew up in America, normal life, and then later everything changed. She says she speaks to God. She can bless you from a place remotely somewhere from thousands of miles away. Your dopamine will increase, it will spike, and your inflammation will reduce. But how? So there are many things we need to talk about. Is she the real deal? Is she the future of mental health and spirituality? Please welcome Dahryn Trivedi. Dahryn, namaste.
Namaste. Thank you for having me here. Thank you so much.
Okay, Dahryn, tell me something really honestly. Do you speak with God? I mean, I've never heard of this, but how does this work? Like, it's a vision, it's a feeling. How do you come to know you are in connect with God?
So I wouldn't say that it's like a voice that comes into your head, or like a person that, holds your hand and says, here's the secret of the universe or anything. It's more of a state of consciousness, right? It's an altered state of consciousness. When you're conscious, as humans are one of those only beings who can evolve their consciousness to the point where they can go beyond the boundaries of nature. And we can say in that state, they are merged with a higher type of consciousness, or the highest level of consciousness, which is the divine, a creator. And so when you're in that state, obviously, you have a greater intellectuality, you have, sharper intuition, you have, certain abilities that come with that. But in addition to that, how it manifests throughout your being when you've evolved and your consciousness has reached that state is you have complete command and control over your thoughts. You can go into complete states of silence and stillness. And I like to say that is how God speaks, in complete silence, complete stillness. And then whatever you need to know, the knowledge comes to you. It's like an intuitive knowingness. You just know things, and sometimes it defies logic. But when the enlightened have reached these points, right, where we're a scientific organization, so I like to define it scientifically as well. So when your consciousness is evolved beyond the boundaries of nature, you see it manifest in that state of mind, right, in your emotions and your physiology as well. It's reflected throughout all states of being. So in your physiology, you see it reflected. Some of the examples of that are, you see my husband, he's my guru, and we've conducted a lot of research on his physiology in Australia and Germany. And we found his physiology, his parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system operate simultaneously together. They operate at the same time. Parasympathetic calms you down. It's related to all the hormones, enzymes, peptides release, all of those things that relate to calming the body and the entire system down. And then you see the sympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for your adrenaline. Like it ramps you up, it gets you ready, like for flight or fight, right? It's that kind of part of your nervous system. So it gives you adrenaline and energy. So you can imagine that these work very contradictory to each other when they're operating at the same time. But in the enlightened, they work simultaneously together. So you're in the deepest state of calmness and the highest state of excitement. So they call this, in other religious texts and spirituality, like those states of, the quiet of the mind that brings about those incredible states of bliss and ecstasy. And those have been my experiences with divine from early childhood, even, where I would enter into these incredible states of complete stillness and silence. And in that moment, I felt like my consciousness was absorbed. It was like dissolved and absorbed into something much greater than myself. And it's almost like I disappeared and just was lost into something, so to speak. And in that state, it was this incredible ecstasy and bliss that permeated my entire being. So that was my experience of what divine was like for me. It was just this incredible stillness, this almost nothingness that was so complete and perfect. It's like all of life pales by comparison. But no, it's not like God comes and speaks to me in a voice or anything like that.
It's just the intuition.
It's an intuition. It's just this inherent connection. And everybody has that to varying degrees. But when you reach higher levels of consciousness, right, I like to say your divine connection is reflected in your quality of life. You see that divine connection, right? It's that inherent connection. When it's stronger, right, you evolve your consciousness. That's what consciousness does. It evolves your being. And in higher states of evolution, you experience mental peace, calmness, happiness, good relationships, right? More harmonious relationships, better financial freedom, right? You experience lower inflammation, greater immunity, right? All of these things are reflections of higher levels of consciousness. And so you can see higher levels of consciousness show an entire ecosystem, so to speak. It's not just an experience within the mind. It's not just a subjective experience. You can actually take it and measure it in the laboratory. It's measurable, it's empirical, and it's data driven. And that's what we've done, is we've taken all this and measured it empirically. We've taken something that has been so difficult to pinpoint and measure for eons, for as long as science has been around. We have been unable to properly measure God or consciousness or anything within those arenas, which is why they've been limited to faith-based institutions. And we're probably the first organization that's effectively taken God, consciousness, put it in a laboratory, pinpointed it, measured it, and been able to demonstrate what higher levels of consciousness do and how they affect our quality of life, our agriculture, our non-living materials, microorganisms, absolutely everything in life.
You've really done that, because this is a biggest breakthrough I've ever heard. When you talk about measuring consciousness in a lab.
I know.
So this is big. Okay, we'll come to all these questions, simultaneously. But as you said that, you connect with God, and then you pass these blessings to other people.
Yes.
Right. But as a layman myself, if I want to connect with God, why would I not, why I'm not able to do it directly? Why do I need a middle man for that, or a middle person for that? I mean, why is not God picking up my calls? What is wrong?
Well, all of us, you're touching upon something very true. All of us have an inherent connection. Right? God is not separate from all of us. God is, a part of our own soul, our own consciousness, right? But we can see varying levels of consciousness, which determine the level of divine grace we can harness in our lives that can, influence our destiny, our fate and fortune, right? So that's when we get into higher levels of consciousness. So it's not like God doesn't exist. God is there, but you can say to varying degrees of evolution, right? Within our own beings and our ability to tap into that resource easily. And so everybody, when they come to this planet, right, we come as children, we come very innocent and pure, right? That's our natural blueprint, right? And everybody has that. And that's when you see children, they're in their most free state. They're in their, purest state. And you see in that, they don't have a single worry in the world. They have no fear of the future, no uncertainty, so long as they have a good relationship with their parents, right? They feel set in life. They're full of freedom, and they exhibit that. They're unbridled ambition and enthusiasm and motivation, huge creativity. They're connected with this strong source of life, right? They have huge energy. They heal faster, right? Everything about them, it seems like that's the peak of life, is when you're a child. And then you cross into the majority of your life, and it seems everything is a downhill, fall from there, a decline. And a large part of that is because we have ignored and misunderstood a vital part of life, right? Which is consciousness, right? When you misunderstand a vital part of life where true wellness and true well-being comes from, right? And you're operating in a world that doesn't have that kind of context, right? That is lost its touch with those divine principles and fundamentals, it's very hard to keep up with that evolution on your own, right? And so as a result, through improper nurturing, through a poor environment, through just the lives we lead, through trauma, things like that, we become more and more disconnected, right? So I like to say it's like you have this presence within you and it gets muddied. It's like this cloud, this cover that covers it. And while everybody can, you know, evolve their consciousness, it's to the degree and the fast,
It
right?
depends
The
on
speed.
the level.
The speed and the level by which we can evolve it to. I would say the requirement for everybody is to have that innocence and purity that determines your conductivity, your ability to harness and being able to evolve at faster rates. But I strongly believe that when you have somebody who's established there, right, you already have somebody, I like to give an example of an ice cube. Right? You have an ice cube sitting on a table by its own, it will dissolve, it will melt on its own. But you take an ice cube and you put it in a glass or a bowl of water, and it's going to dissolve a lot faster, very quickly. So in the same way, right, when we're stuck in a specific type of consciousness, right, you can imagine it, it's like this structure that binds us in a certain state of being in a certain way in life, like with a certain destiny or fate and fortune. And it's almost impossible. And we've tried this, habits, you know, patterns, things in life, very difficult to break, right? It takes a huge amount of willpower, and people are limited in willpower, as well as ability to be able to transcend certain situations in life, right? So we work with what we have, and whatever we have, we get depleted very quickly. So you have somebody who's established within that consciousness, like a glass or a bowl of water, then what happens is that dissolution, that transformation is very quick. And so it's like a jumper cable that's connecting you to that authority. The transformation comes through that connection, your own connection to God. It's not like we are standing, you know, in place of God, that we're like a new God. It's more like we are simply helping with that connection. We are facilitating it. We're making it stronger, and all the benefits people receive in their lives, whether it be an object, an organism, a microbe, non-living material, a crop, plant, tree, human, no matter what it is, the moment you're able to establish that connection and raise that consciousness, then you see the outcome, and that's measurable.
Yeah, that's why, you know, in India, they say you need a guru in life or a teacher in life to show the direction, to show the correct path and to guide you.
Yes.
And I think you have described it very well. So one, I'm like very curious to know many, many things from you, but one thing I think the audience would be interested also, can someone get rich with the blessing?
They can improve their finances. They can improve their prosperity. We've actually conducted a few clinical trials that has effectively proven.
For this also?
Yeah, for this also, right? The same people who came to us with mental and emotional, severe mental and emotional health problems, all of them resolved by the end of the clinical trial. And the people who were breadwinners in their family, who had jobs, who had, you know, financial issues, either they were resolved or their finances doubled, tripled, quadrupled by the end of the clinical trial. So we've seen it, this affects everything, all aspects of life. It's not limited to just health or mental health or anything. This is something that is permeable.
There's an overall change, a life shift, you're saying.
Everything. We're talking like a new destiny, right? These people from this destiny, they have a certain quality of life with certain relationships, certain finances, certain job opportunities, right? They're just certain things that happen within this, you know, existence. And then when you change the consciousness behind that person, evolve it, you evolve the destiny, you transform their destiny. So everything changes with that. Everything matches their new destiny.
Yeah. So, you know, when you were talking before, you mentioned that you were very young. I think you were 8 when you had a vision.
Yes.
That you would get married to an enlightened person or an enlightened man in your life, and this happened. But for this, I mean, you did not have alcohol, you did not, you know, party, or you did not, there were many things you sacrificed in life.
Yes.
You know, for the generation where people want to explore their life freely, and, you know, you lived your life in a very disciplined manner, in a very disciplined way.
Yes.
So do you ever feel that you missed out on something, or this disciplined life has given you something which all of us are missing right now?
So I don't feel like it was the disciplined life that gave me anything, except it helped me maintain something. For me, it was about maintaining, because when I had these experiences, right, I told you these experiences came from a very young age, right, even before I had that vision, right, that knowingness that I would marry this enlightened master. And so I had this, incredible ecstasy in my life. So everything by comparison, it's like when you have, a job that gives you $1 million versus a job that gives you $10 an hour, it's like you have no desire for the job that gives you $10 an hour anymore. You're satisfied here. So it's like everything that people are usually attached to, or they have curiosity or desire for, it's like those desires never attached themselves to me from early childhood, because I had my connection to something much higher that fulfilled me even more, that gave me mental peace, that gave me real happiness, those types of things. So as a result, in the context of religion and spirituality that I grew up with, I figured that if I'm going to meet this man that I saw from my vision when I was 8 years of age, right, I should conduct myself with the highest level of ethics and morality. And from an 8-year-old's understanding, it's like, don't do drugs, like don't smoke, don't have alcohol, all those types of things. I do believe that maybe they helped me maintain this sense of innocence and purity within me. But I truly feel it was more of my sense of ethics and morality as a human being. I had a sense of, if I'm going to meet this guru, right, I should be a good person. I should maintain that. I should make sure I'm worthy, right, to my understanding. And so I was like, I shouldn't be selfish. I shouldn't, be focusing on this. I should be more caring for others. I should be empathetic. It was like I tried to embody the highest level of ethics and morality that I could. And so I just put it all together and just led my life in accordance with that.
Yeah. So your mother introduced you to Guruji, right?
Yes.
And then he gave you a blessing, and then you ended up getting married to him.
Right.
So, so the story is very interesting.
Yeah.
But my audience would like to know, like, explain this to me. Where does the spiritual experience end and the human emotion begin?
I would say spiritual experience never ends. Everything is a spiritual experience if you really look at it. But human emotion, I say, is really when you are controlled and operated by your own mind, right? When you can still have emotions, and be connected, be enlightened. So it's not like enlightenment is devoid of emotion, right? So many people will see an enlightened person and wondering, like, can they still cry? Can they be happy? All those things. Of course they can, right? So it's not really that they're devoid of emotion. It's more like they're established, so they have complete control. They're in that calmness all the time. They're at peace with life and everything with it. So it's more like, if anything, I feel like it enhances your emotions. It makes you feel more than a normal person does. You feel more for others. You have more love. You have more empathy. You have more caring. You sacrifice more. You do more for others. I feel like it enhances and evolves them, not takes them away or turns into something different. I think it just grows them, evolves them to a new state of being. But you're not controlled by them. That's the beauty of it. You're in control instead of being controlled by your thoughts and emotions.
Okay. Somewhere in one of your interviews, I heard you saying that you do not believe in meditation, NLP, or yoga because these are just uh, gimmicks, right? And they do not work, or nothing changes in your body. So, this is a very uncomfortable
I
answer,
understand, yeah.
and something that you said which is going to make many of us uncomfortable, including me, because this is what we do on everyday basis.
Right.
So are we wasting our time here?
So here's the thing. When we get into practices and techniques and tricks, those types of things, it's not inherently in the practice or the trick or the technique where evolution and consciousness lies, right? It's in the same way where, right, if we're talking about consciousness and its nature, and everything is just an expression of consciousness, right? Consciousness is a fundamental reality, meaning it's the origin of life, right? It's the thing that sustains us. We are not self-sustaining. We have not created ourselves. We exist because there's something absolute to our existence that lies beyond us, right? In the same way, if you die or I die, the sun will continue to rise and set, right? There's motions and there's a law, there's a permanence to life that exists beyond us that we come from, right? So we are not existing, and we do not transform and grow through our own efforts alone. So I would say that anybody who is adopting a spiritual practice or belief, I'm not against, first and foremost, any spiritual practice or belief. I'm not against people who meditate. I'm not against people who pray to God or perform a ritual or anything like that. I'm not also perpetuating the idea of doing those. I'm not selling a practice. I'm not selling a trick or a technique for people to adopt and implement into their lives. I truly feel that if you do get anything from it, right, it should be measurable. You should be able to take it and put it in a laboratory. I feel like outcome is missing in a lot of spiritual people's lives. I feel like outcome should be something that is important. It should be the predominant, focus on a specific ritual or belief or technique or whatever we involve ourselves with. It should be outcome focused, not process focused. But we've been so focused on adopting and implementing and trying practices that we just adopt more, and we try new ones and we switch them out all the time. And in reality, even those who meditate and pray to God, are they even praying to God? Who are they praying to? Most of these people, they think they're praying to God, but they're praying more to their own consciousness. They're praying more to a belief. They're praying more to a concept, something they think about God, but they're not actually establishing a connection with that real authority, that absolute that exists beyond us. So if we want to instill permanent change in our life, you have to appease to that authority, right? Energy always flows from a higher dimension to a lower dimension. In the same way, Albert Einstein recognized that same issue with physics and the laws of nature. And he said, consciousness cannot be altered from the same level of consciousness that created it, right? So from our own consciousness, we can do nothing, right? You cannot exceed or go beyond the bounds of your consciousness through your own consciousness, right? You need more energy. You need an external source. You need something to give you the momentum to exceed, to excel, to evolve beyond the boundaries of your own consciousness. That's establishing yourself with that authority. And like I said, the best way to do that is to maintain your purity and innocence and then evolve your consciousness. But that's difficult for a lot of people, especially when we don't have a reference for that, because all of our references are belief-based or faith-based, coming from institutions that have been unable to empirically prove it. And so they've been dismissed by so many people, right? So that's the main issue, is we don't have a reference for it as our modern society. It's not become a cultural norm for a lot of people. We always connect to God based upon a religion or a belief or a reference or like an ideology, as opposed to something sincere and authentic, a real connection that we have ourselves, like those direct experiences I had as a child. It was outside of the context of religion.
Yeah, because how do you explain that, right? I have tried, meditation a lot of times, and all I've experienced is like too many thoughts. Whenever I close my eyes, there are too many thoughts, like hundreds of thoughts running in my mind, and I was like, it's some problem with me, why I'm not able to concentrate on one thing. So, and then I tried many times, but it never worked, never helped. Yeah. So, because see, when we're talking about consciousness and meditation and all of that, in metro cities, when you see majority of youngsters or people have these meditation apps, they are going through anxiety or depression. There are many things, right? But you are saying that these apps are not going to help. This doesn't change anything in your consciousness or your DNA. Is that correct?
It's your consciousness that is able to deliver anything useful from any practice you do. So if you're at a certain level of consciousness, you might be able to derive something from something, right? But it's the consciousness that gets the work done. That's the operator behind all of it. Everything is just an expression of that. Even our states of mind are expressions of consciousness. We like to think our minds are capable of doing anything, but if you actually look at the structure and how the mind operates, we're working like, 1 versus 1 billion. Right, that's the amount of energy and neurons and parts of our brain that are working against conscious thought all the time. I don't know if you know this, but there's a lot of studies conducted over a bunch of like Ivy League, universities, Harvard and, Cambridge, Oxford, all these, universities got together and conducted a bunch of research on, our senses, right? And there is a certain amount of information that our senses is processed. I think it was either 1 billion or 10 billion, but it's a huge amount of information that our senses are constantly processing at one time within 1 second, right? You can imagine if it's 10 billion bits of information for 1 second,
Correct.
right? How can your mind, your conscious mind, process all of that? It can't. So what ends up happening is the mind pares down that information before it even enters the brain. Right? Before it enters the brain, your RAS, your reticular activating system, and all your senses translate all of that information into maybe 10 bits of information. So 10 billion to 10, right? That's a huge paring down of information. And what determines what information you pare down is your level of consciousness.
Okay.
So you're dealing with like a huge part of your brain that is connected and orchestrated and formed before conscious thought even is there within your mind.
So you're saying here that these problems, the anxiety, depression and whatnot we are talking about, so for all of this, science is treating these spiritual problems with a chemical solution?
Absolutely. Like what the main issue, and you'll see this across everything, like we've conducted 6,000 science experiments, right? Everything that conventional methodologies, conventional science and medicine has found limitations, even alternative and complementary therapies have found limitations in being able to address. We've been able to address those and find real outcome, real solutions with our science experiments. So for example, with agriculture, right, we've been able to produce 500% greater yield, right? With the best methods we have to conventional agriculture, using all the pesticides, fungicide, weedicides, chemical fertilizers, the best methods they have using all the chemicals and everything available to them, they're able to, produce enough yield, but not quality of produce. We've been able to, first of all, increase yield by even comparison to that without any chemicals whatsoever by as much as 500%.
But
right?
how is this possible? Like,
This is raising consciousness through these divine blessings. That's all we're doing.
okay.
And so we've been able to increase yield. When they're struggling with this type of yield with all these chemicals, we increase yield by as much as 500%. We've increased plant immunity by as much as 600%. So you don't need to use the same type of chemicals to fend off bacteria and microbes. The plants have an inherent immunity to fight it off on its own. We change the soil microbiology by just blessing a plant or a seed. Right? You can change the soil. We get like as much as 900% more beneficial bacteria, 600% less harmful bacteria.
Is this possible? Because this sounds like more of magic to me. Like,
we have the data, we have the scientific studies.
Dahryn, see, there are two things here. At one point, we are talking about God and enlightenment and consciousness, but on the other hand, you're talking about experiments.
Right.
Experiments, because it's science versus God. So how does this go hand in hand? Because science and God are not friends. Because it's been from years we have seen they do not go hand in hand.
Right.
Science do not accept that there is presence of God. So how are we talking about two things here? Because as I said, you're talking about God, enlightenment and divine blessing, and then on the other hand, you're talking about science and labs and experiments also.
Right. Well, the biggest thing with that is, at one point in time, they weren't always separate. Years ago, back at the origin of religion, origin of culture and society, they were together. They were one thing. But over time, we saw a huge divide in religion and science. And the main reason for that, especially it happened at the time of Galileo with the, telescope and all of that. Okay. But what we really found is that when these two started to work separately, right, science was able to advance a lot of things within society. Science was able to advance, like our agriculture. It was able to advance our medicine. It was able to give us like air conditioners, technology, all the things that we use and are very comfortable with. It was able to solve a lot of problems and provide us with a lot of comforts in life and help advance humanity, greatly. So we started to rely greatly on science. And religion was unable to produce the same for people. It was unable to give the same same kind of fast and huge, productive outcome in the same way science could. And when science, saw religion, it basically, challenged religion. Science was saying, because there was, incongruencies between what science identified and recognized about the world and what religion said. And so religion, not wanting to, lose its control, right? Instead, what it did is it just said, well, you have to have faith, right? You have to believe, then these things work. And science was like, well, you don't have to have faith in gravity. For gravity to work, it's an objective thing. It should be empirical. It should be measurable. Same concept with religion. It wanted to apply the same to religion. Religion was not able to meet it in the same arena in terms of empirical data. So religion failed in that aspect. And as a result of that, because religion could not produce enough, did not deliver enough outcome, we left religion. You see, I believe even the younger generation, if you look at the statistics now, especially in America, I don't know about India, but in America, whereas the older generation, they're still majority, like I think it was over 60 or 70% of people still are part of religion. I think it's even higher than that. Now with the youth,
it's the same in India.
50%. It's the greatest number of people that are not involved in religion at any other point in time in history. So you see more people are leaving religion than ever before because they trust science, right? Now, unfortunately, science, with religion's inability to demonstrate how God interacts with the world, how God, applies, how God works, right? Religion is missing that vital part of life. Religion says God is omniscient. How do you take that and put it in a laboratory? How can you prove that? Religion says these rituals and practices can enhance your fate and fortune and transform your destiny, but again, unable to take it and put it in the laboratory. So everybody relies on science. They'd rather rely on science's antibiotics for a bacterial infection than a prayer from a pastor or minister at a church, right? There's a certain choice we make when we make between the two of them. We rely on one more than the other, unfortunately. And I don't believe that they should be separate, because I feel like what's happened now with science is that because of science's new paradigm of understanding that the world is materialistic and the world is chemically oriented, right? Chemical and mechanical, all of those things, and it has excluded the nature, the operating nature of divine and consciousness. We have some theories about consciousness being fundamental, but again, unable to prove it, right? So it's not a mainstream science. It's quantum physics. It's a side science, right? So we're talking about something that has been excluded from the modern narrative of human nature.
Okay.
So when you exclude that, you're excluding a vital part of our lives that makes life happen, that gives us life. It's the source of all life. We are all expressions of consciousness. And it's the one thing that when you evolve, it gets rid of all of your problems. It's the one solution for all of our problems. So you see, when you reach certain limits, right, with mechanical and chemical processes, it's the same reason why you reach limits in meditation and prayer and all those other things. You're working within a certain spectrum, and the moment you reach a limit, you can't go beyond that. Right. So in the same way, science has found a limit in its ability to address, bacteria. Right. We found that within, a few years, we already have several strains of bacteria that don't respond to antibiotics. You get that bacteria, you're gone. Right. The likelihood of you surviving that, high mortality rates, because we have nothing to treat it anymore. We have no antibiotics for that. And then the amount of superbugs are growing. They're increasing. Okay. Right? Simply by raising consciousness, we've been able to make antibiotic-resistant drugs finally respond to antibiotics again. Yeah. Right? We've been able to change non-living materials, where science says that, we see our huge advancements in our technology, huge advancements with AI, right? There's this huge drive. There's a race now. There's a battle, a new kind of war that we're fighting, and it's in technology. And it's like one nation versus another, one company versus another, right? After OpenAI released ChatGPT, we see all these other chatbots suddenly starting to come to life, and all these other AIs, they were already being created, but now the rush is there to really deliver something and then, accrue and grow and produce more. And unfortunately, we have limitations with our rare earth materials and our technology, the materials we have that can help us process data fast, that can help, when you process data fast, like silicon, certain things have issues with heat distribution, right? So if you can somehow change the structure of the material, you can enhance and improve processing speeds, improve efficiency, create more technological advancements that you couldn't before. We're able to create new materials with these blessings. We're able to alter the atomic and molecular structure of non-living materials that changes the physical constants, that makes them better for solar use, for technology, for computing. All these things can advance our technology where science and technology have found limits. Same thing with our agriculture, where they've reached limits, right? We're at the risk of losing crops in our world. Our environment, our soil, our health is so toxic now because the amount of chemicals that they use on these crops, it's insane, right? We have 800% more nitrogen fertilizer usage now than we did in the late 1950s or 60s, right? We're using twice as many toxic chemicals now than at any other point in time in history, right? We're not reducing our usage in toxic chemicals, even with this talk of healthy food and organic food and, pristine and all these other, conversations we're having about producing better quality and we're eating more. And I don't know if you've heard this information in India where it's like even those who can afford, right? Those who have better, financial freedom, who can afford fruits and vegetables, who can afford healthier diets, you see cancer rates increasing in those people more than other populations. Why? Because of the toxic chemicals in that food, right? And then there's the issues women face with their menstrual health, with, PCOS and endometriosis and all these other inflammatory-based conditions. More people with allergies and food sensitivities. Where is all this coming from? Why are we allergic to so many fruits and vegetables? Why can't we eat them? Why can't our bodies metabolize them anymore, right? All of this, we've reached a breaking point with our worldwide systems and our ability to address these problems, provide solutions, and advance further. In the same way, you see the mental health pandemic. This is truly pandemic proportions. We're spending trillions of dollars of our economy worldwide to treat mental health disorders. So we're not, ignoring them. We're treating them. Trillions of dollars. More than 1 billion of our entire population has a mental health problem, a diagnosable one anyway. And then on top of that, and those are only people part of the census. We have outliers who aren't even involved in the census. And then you also have, issues when you see mental health crisis, right? The stigma, we're talking about it more. People are getting therapy. People are trying drugs. In India, it's a big topic now. A lot of people are sharing about it, talking about their stories, all these different things. So we're addressing it now more than at any other time in history. And yet we see a weird problem happening where the number of mental health problems are rapidly rising instead of decreasing, right? And on top of that, what do you have? So with all of this distrust happening, because we see failure and suffering, no answers, no solutions, people are losing trust with science and medicine. You've seen that. People are questioning whether they should get vaccinated or not. People are questioning whether they should,
That was one big question all of us had, that should we get vaccinated or not?
Exactly. People have lost trust in science and medicine. And because even, those who get vaccinated, they're like, is this actually good for my health? They're starting to notice holes in the issues and the narrative that science has with human health, right, and well-being. And so we've identified these problems now. It's in our awareness, it's in our consciousness. So you see more people leaving science, leaving their trust of the establishment, trying more natural approaches, more holistic, more healthy. And then you're seeing this booming of the wellness industry, multi-trillion-dollar industry. It's more profitable than the pharmaceutical industry. More profitable. We complain the pharmaceutical industry is greedy and they want our money. Wellness industry wants your money far more. And unfortunately, women are the major, consumers of the wellness industry because they've been overlooked for so long by science and, medicine as well. So when you have no answers and you've been disregarded and misdiagnosed and just given management over long periods of time, eventually you lose faith as well. And so they're a big proportion of the wellness industry. So you see Like we have like a worldwide systems collapse. And what we've seen with 6,000 science studies, over 670 peer-reviewed publications, and we're not talking just on human health, but we have 4 clinical trials on human health, mental and emotional health problems, as well as over 100 blood parameters in randomized, controlled, and double-blinded placebo, clinical trials. So really legitimate clinical trials. And then you have, so many experiments we've done in agriculture, plants, trees, nuts, seeds, fruits, soil. We have, bacteria, viruses, fungi, right? We change mutations of bacteria. We'd be able to create new species. We've been able to create new species, things that only nature can do, we're able to do, right? When consciousness has evolved beyond the consciousness of nature, you can do things that nature can do, which is create new species, create new materials. We've been able to produce that scientifically, proving that this is real enlightenment that's happening. This is real something from the divine, something from a creator, somebody that created, sustained life. That same creator can change it. We've been able to change those structures of life itself.
But see, Dahryn, we are talking about modern science here. Modern science does not accept God or existence of God. And then we are talking about, 6,000 experiments done by your organization, which are legit, right?
Right.
And I want to know how can we measure a divine blessing?
Absolutely. So the beauty of it, and I truly see in the future science accepting this. And I'll tell you why. So first of all,
so you're saying science would accept the Trivedi effect?
One day, yes.
One day?
I truly believe it. And I will get into that. I will tell you why, because I feel like you have no choice. I feel like the world really, it's come to a certain crisis within our world that we have no choice. And at the same time, what we're able to demonstrate in terms of outcome, it's like that's the new measurement of reliability in this world is outcome, authenticity. We're in an inauthentic era, right? Where so many people have lost trust in establishments, politicians, wellness, science, everything. We're looking for authenticity. The biggest demonstration of authenticity is just that demonstration. Outcome, empirical data. We're doing that scientifically, which is legitimate, right? It's the first time it's been able to done to this proportion, to this extensiveness and expansiveness. And I'm not talking about 1 or 10 experiments that have delivered, unprecedented data. All of them, all 6,000 of them have delivered those kinds of unprecedented outcome. There's no precedence beyond this. And I'm telling you, it's not just limited to one area as well. It applies to everything, life sciences, non-living materials. We've changed atomic structures. We've changed physical constants of materials. We've been able to alter, like I said, the things that inhibit our, computer processing and everything. We've altered the structures so that they can process faster, things of that nature. And so when we see this whole establishment start to crumble, right, and we see all these problems, especially mental health rising because of, the greatest mental health crisis is our stress. And you see what stress leads to, chronic inflammation. Inflammation is one of the greatest root causes of all the disorders and diseases we see today. Most of them that are occurring today are all linked back to inflammation. In fact, Harvard came up with a theory of disease where inflammation is the root cause of all disease. And the greatest source of inflammation is mental health. And so you're able to solve mental health. You can solve most of the diseases you even see today. And we've seen that reflected in our clinical trials. You change cognition, motor function, you influence mental and emotional health. That leads to better health, better quality of life, and everything else is trickled out as a result of that. But what we're doing is where everything else has reached a limit and incapacity to treat, right? Science, denies the existence of God. Yes, science says God can't be real. There are some scientists that the more they look into science, the more they believe science to be real. But what I truly believe that will make the masses accept what we have to offer is when you see all the limits, right? All of the issues, and you actually provide a solution for them. You provide answers. If you're able to extend beyond the reaches of what science is able to deliver and deliver those same outcomes, right? And that's through the integration of science, religion, and spirituality, all 3 of them together, right? You're delivering an outcome that people can't deny. And we're already doing this. We're working with multi-billion-dollar corporation within the United States, right? And it's something related to chicken, poultry produce, right? Chicken and eggs. And what we're doing is that establishment, right, the industry has no choice but to accept it, because if you look at it, right, what we're delivering for them, we've conducted, several experiments on chicken. We're able to increase edible meat while decreasing the amount of food consumption. So there's profit there, right? More edible meat without food consumption. They're paying less for food and getting more, profit per ounce of bird, or however much bird you're delivering, right? And then reducing mortality rate. So you have more birds at the end of production. We're able to increase, their lifespan and their quality of life. And then on top of that, you have greater yield of quality produce, right? Without the use of the antibiotics or the hormones or toxic chemicals or anything that conventional, modalities use to produce that same amount of chicken. So we're producing healthier food, quality food that consumers will have trust in. They'll taste the difference, feel the difference. It'll improve their health, all these health issues they get. And then you're adding profit, right? When we did the calculation, if we're able to establish this across all the poultry houses, you can improve their profit margins by billions of dollars. So it would be foolish for them to deny that kind of profit. So you're working in ways that people would just understand that this is an essential part of our transformation and for our growth, for our potential, right? For our agriculture, this is the answer. For our mental health, this is the answer, right? We're helping pharmaceutical industry. We're helping their antibiotics become useful again to work against bacteria that no longer responds to them. We're helping all these other industries grow and utilize their products to advance their own industries by simply doing one thing, and that's raising consciousness.
So this is like too good to be true. It's like,
It
you're
sounds
talking
like
about
it, yes.
impossible, things we are talking
agree
about.
with you.
Because if it's true, why we do not see these blessings in the hospitals, and, why are we not looking after it? I mean, there are so many people going through different anxiety, depression, or don't know what. I mean, everyone is going through that. So it's like too good to be true you're talking about,
I agree. And
this is 2026, and what you said right now, with
Right.
just a blessing and a divine grace, and it's just impossible.
I know. Well, I agree with you completely.
Yeah.
Even sometimes when we do these, experiments, like they're all third party. So when we get the results back and the scientists share the results with us, even sometimes it's shocking for us what this blessing can do, because you can never expect it. It's always a miracle. It's always grace when it happens. But I mean, honestly, it's we have the data behind it. It might be too good to be true, but here's the thing. We've repeated these experiments 6,000 times. We've repeatable data. We're always getting an outcome. We're always producing something. This is legitimate, right? We've done clinical trials. We've conducted 4,000 experiments on non-living materials, things that work outside the realm of psychology and placebo influence. Every experiment conducted, other complementary and alternative approaches have been conducted on human psychology with trivial parameters with physiology. So the studies are not legitimate to become a mainstream predominant scientific theme. Right. And so what we've done is we've done enough empirical data for it to be accepted one day. If they want answers, if they want solutions, we're providing them. We're the one group, the one organization.
And
right. It's a nonprofit organization. It's all public. It's all available to the public. It's all on our website, divineconnection.org. It's a nonprofit organization with this mission to advance this science, establish the existence of consciousness of our creator, of the divine, as well as to, provide answers to all these problems we see with our agriculture, with our material science and our technology, with human health and well-being. We've transformed the lives of over 300,000 people. So beyond experiments, we've actually applied this to people's lives. Over 300,000 people have experienced this with extraordinary outcomes. I have so many incredible testimonials I could share with you about what they've experienced, but like the data speaks for itself. It's like no matter whether we can accept it, if it fits in our belief system, if it's rational or not. Ultimately, when a non-living material responds with an unprecedented result, right? When using NASA level technology, right? The most, the highest sophisticated technology we have available to us, right? Third-party institutions, worldwide, multinational research institutes and universities, right? California Pacific Medical Research Institute. We've conducted experiments in Australia, Germany, the United States, as well as India, all over the world, right? And so we're not just talking about like a couple plants in my backyard that I've written a report about and said, look at the growth, right? This is like acreage. We're talking like 9,000 cashew samplings on 106 acres of land, right? We're talking about control and treated samples so we can see the difference between the two, not just what we feel looks good, right? Yeah. We're using controlled parameters, the most legitimate scientific materials, methods, and protocols that every scientist used to establish what we've currently established scientifically. We're applying the same to what we do. We're not doing anything different. We're not making any loopholes or making any type of, subjective data. We've purposefully instilled protocols, blinding protocols, created placebo psychological groups to eliminate psychological data, to make sure that none of those things impact the data that we're here to present with you today. And so on top of that, the reason why you haven't heard about what we've done, right, there are probably a few reasons for that, but the biggest one is we haven't really shared this on a world level yet. Right, we've been slowly gaining momentum in our messaging, but for the last few decades, right, this is not something that, like these science experiments are not something you can do in a day or even a year, right? This is something that takes decades of time, millions of dollars. We spent millions of dollars to conduct this research. You're not going to find a lot of governments that will grant this or, do this for free if you say, I want to bless something and see what happens.
So you're blessing thousands of people, from miles away, remotely, and different languages, different countries, different people, living, non-living. It's a breakthrough. I mean, I have studied science, but it's something which is very extraordinary that I've heard today from you.
Yeah. But in fact, 3 of our clinical trials were conducted remotely. So located in the United States, while the participants are located in India, we have no idea who they are. We don't know their problems. We don't know their names. The investigators don't even know which group is getting the blessing.
How do you solve their problems? I mean, okay,
you just raise consciousness. Like I said, consciousness is the answer to all of it. Everything is an expression, lower levels and higher levels of consciousness. Okay. Consciousness has one function. How it operates is at higher levels of intensity, higher levels of consciousness, right? It organizes your entire being, your mind, your emotions, your physiology, and it evolves you to higher levels. Everything that we see, all the problems we see, all stem from lower levels of consciousness. We could say disorganized states of being.
Yeah.
Right?
Tell me something, is this data real? Dopamine up by 422% and inflammation down by 95%.
Yes.
Is this information real? Is this data real?
That is real.
That it's a revolution.
And protein increased by as much as 685%.
Okay, so but why has the government not picked this up then?
It has. It's available with the National Institutes of Health. It's been indexed by over 3,000 universities in over 100 countries.
In mainstream?
Right, mainstream universities, Harvard, MIT, Cambridge, Oxford, all these universities have them. They're in their public libraries and they're, indexed within their libraries. So they're all available. The issue is that, until you're actually able to provide maybe a product or apply it to an industry, right? There's going to be a lot of hesitancy from people to accept it. And I feel like that's only natural because so many times we're used to, right, like I said, a world of inauthenticity, or a world of charlatans. You have religion and spirituality where you have a lot of distrust there because science can't infiltrate that zone because everything's subjective and faith-driven, right? So you have a lot of people who can abuse those privileges, right? I call it a privilege when you have, working with human belief alone, because you can take advantage of people. You take all their money, you can manipulate, you can abuse them, you can molest them, you can do all these sorts of things. And we've heard all those stories from many different false gurus and charlatans and so-called healers from the spirituality, right? So many people who have, now been like incarcerated recently, or we're finding out worked with like the Epstein and all these different things, right? We're finding all these things that are coming to light now from these people who have put on a show. They've done good marketing, right? But they have no real legitimate science behind it. So I really feel we need to bring integrity back to science and as well as back to religion and spirituality. Science is also a new religion to certain contexts because we're dealing with scientists who have their own bias. And the reason of that is because, right, you take a lot of predominant scientific themes, right? Nobody ever tested for themselves. We trust it. You read it in a textbook, a teacher teacher tells you it, so you assume it's true because science has proven its reliability over the years. You would never go inside your home after you learn that water boils at 100 degrees centigrade and go in and check the temperature it actually starts boiling at, right? A lot of these experiments we don't conduct ourselves because of our trust, our faith in science. We believe them to be true, and all of our scientific understanding, all of our medicine, all of agriculture, everything is based on the assumption science knows what it's talking about. And unfortunately, we found, right, with all these issues and what we're able to produce, science doesn't have the correct dominant theme about reality. So one scientist told me, as we were working together, Dr. Claude Swanson, he said, there's a saying that goes, science progresses, one funeral at a time. Basically saying at the death of old, scientists with their own, rigorous biases and, belief systems, that science has the opportunity to progress when the new generation comes in. But I feel like this will happen even faster than that, because what we're talking about is fulfilling a need. When you fulfill a need, right, that's where industries are built upon. That's where entrepreneurs find their success. That's where human life is driven upon. We all find needs fulfilled somewhere, whether it's science, whether it's medicine, religion, spirituality, everything is there to fulfill a need within us. When that need can't be fulfilled elsewhere, and they find the need fulfilled through what we're doing, through the outcomes we're presenting, then that trust will be established. And slowly, I feel like old dominant levels of understanding will fall away on their own.
Correct. Let's talk about a different angle also.
Yes.
What if someone comes to you, takes the blessing, but he doesn't feel anything, there is no change? What happens then?
Well, the beauty of that is you don't need to feel a change for there to be a change, right? You can still measure your blood. You can still measure all these other parameters. We like to educate people because sometimes you have an expectation versus reality, right? We want to marry Princess Diana, right? When we get a blessing, we want to, be able to levitate when we get a blessing, right? There's certain expectations that we have that we want versus reality. And when we're not meeting those kinds of expectations because they're unreasonable, right? And nature doesn't work that way. Physiology doesn't work that way, right? Life doesn't work that way.
What if an atheist comes to you, and someone who doesn't believe in God, but comes to you, pays for the blessing, and then things doesn't work out for him? What happens then?
So atheism has nothing to do with it.
No?
So, right, think of all the experiments we've done. We've conducted, a few experiments on people. A majority of them have been conducted on non-living materials, on plants, animals, microbes, bacteria, viruses, fungi, metals, ceramics, polymers, and chemicals. How many of things have a belief system? How many of things have faith in God? How many of these things meditate and say a puja, say a prayer? How many of these things worship God or do anything in their life to deliver such an unprecedented outcome? What we've seen is belief systems, psychology. We've eliminated psychology. We've eliminated belief. We've even eliminated people altogether. Right?
Okay.
And then on top of that, we've also, conducted these on so many things that people have hesitated out of fear of conducting them on because, they believe that maybe something in psychological data will be reflected because of belief alone. But non-living materials, how many people would touch non-living materials confidently? Right? When my Guruji, right, he's the one that founded all this and started this. When he started this scientific research, right, he went to material scientists saying, let's work together. Let's figure this out. Let's collaborate. That led him to working with one of the most renowned material scientists of our time, Dr. Roy. Right? He's considered one of the fathers of material science for all of its scientific foundations and understanding. He was so fascinated with this guru that came from India that's seeking scientific corroboration, right, to validate his abilities. And at the same time, he saw the results. He saw the laws of physics being changed. Right? He saw all these things happening and he was like, this I've never seen. He's worked on the structure of water, on other healers, changing the structure of water and everything. And he's well familiar with those studies, but none of them paralleled even remotely what Guruji Trivedi was doing with his material science. And on top of that, I like to tell people that we have people from all different backgrounds, right? We have Christians, we have Hindus, we have Buddhists, we have atheists, we have people from all different backgrounds, from, you know, the Muslim community, everybody. It doesn't matter. It doesn't seem to matter what you believe in, what your faith is.
How does this work with the enlightened person? You know, once you're enlightened, you don't age, you don't grow old, or
aging is normal.
Or you know, do you feel frustrated like any other normal people?
No,
Do you
not in the
forget
same
things?
way, I'd say.
Do you forget
Oh
things?
yeah,
like
I'm human. I'll forget things.
How does this work with you?
I mean, like I said, one of the greatest parameters is you have control over your mind,
Okay.
right? Which gives you access to these higher levels of consciousness. So, right, there's this mastery over the mind that, you know, you have the ability to regulate your thoughts and your emotions, right? This is permanent calmness and peace, this stillness that exists within you, and you carry it wherever you go. It's like you are that temple. It's like, you know,
Okay.
in a lot of religious books, they always say, you know, the kingdom of God is within you, from Christianity and all these different things. It's true.
Yeah.
You carry that wherever you go. In the same way, you renounce the world, you run off to the Himalayas, you carry yourself wherever you go. That's not the answer. The answer is in consciousness, at the level of consciousness. So, but, you know, I go through the same trials and tribulations dealing with, you know, like you know, biased scientists.
Because some days you have a bad day, some days you have a good day. So yeah, that's what I wanted to ask. How does that work?
The beauty is, even the bad days, when you're coming from this level of consciousness, that's all opportunities for growth from that level. That's how you see them, and that's how you experience them. That's how they actually register. Right? You take the good from it. It's like a lotus growing in the mud. So, right, you have all this mud, you can't get rid of the mud, but what happens is the lotus still grows. So it's like you have this experience, you're able to take the beneficial parts of it. In the same way, from higher levels of consciousness, you absorb the good nutrition from food and are able to detoxify the bad, you know, qualities from the food. Same way with the mind. The mind can pull the good from the environment and detoxify all the useless thoughts, all the useless emotions, everything. It's like a spiritual immunity that you gain from higher levels of consciousness that reflects on all levels. Again, mental, emotional, physical, but all these things are touched upon in every aspect of life and everything that you do. So everything, even struggles, becomes actually like, you know, something wonderful for you. It becomes growth. We've had a lot of struggle. We've had, oh, I wanted to tell you about this, right? I love to share this story where recently we've had a few publications in this journal, and I won't share the journal publicly, but we have enough record between our communication. But right, we have over 670 peer-reviewed publications, right? Which is, you know, if you know anything about the peer review process, right? Whenever you're a scientist, you want to get a peer review publication. It's very authentic, right? It's a whole group of your peers approving the data, materials, methods, saying, you know, everything's legitimate. This is great data. Let's publish it. You know, gives you the green light. So it's a way of maintaining scientific credibility and authenticity, legitimacy, integrity, all of that. That's the peer review process. Most scientists will get maybe like a dozen peer reviews in their whole life. We have 670. So that shows the scale of our number, right?
Correct.
On top of that, just recently in one of the journals that we've already published a few articles in, right? So we had a specific editor, and on the peer review board, right, we have PhD level scientists that will like read the article, go through the data, check everything, make sure there are no flaws, issues, right? Basically like review the entire study, data, protocol, all of it. And these are PhD level scientists, so they're very accredited. So they'll check through everything and they'll give their approval. Like either they'll say, okay, this is ready for publication, they'll reject it, or they'll send it back and tell you some changes need to be made, right? So most of the peer review boards have like maybe 3 or 4 PhD level scientists at most, right? So ours was sent to 4 PhD level scientists, right? All of them reviewed it, went through everything, found nothing wrong, found the data extraordinary, were excited about publishing it, said, yes, this needs to be published. They greenlit it, right? All 4 of them. No, it wasn't published. So all 4 of them greenlit the publication, right? The editor sent it to 1 more PhD level scientist, said, can you, review this for me? He approved it, sent it to another, they approved it, sent it to another, they approved it, sent it to another. Eventually, it went through 9 PhD level scientists from his review board that he wanted to, he or she wanted to look through and make sure, is this legitimate? Is the data real? Like, how do you feel about this? All of them, all 9 scientists approved the publication for being published, right? But it was still rejected at the last minute by the editor himself, who said that I simply don't believe that the data is real and that this can happen. That you can bless a group, this is one of our clinical trials, it can bless a group remotely from the United States all across on the other side of the world and get this kind of data as well. Yeah. I don't believe that that's possible, so I'm not going to publish it. Yeah. So for that reason alone, it was rejected. Okay. Even though 9 PhD level scientists approved it and said there's nothing wrong with it. Because the data was unprecedented. So you can imagine the struggle that we've been through over decades of doing this. And we wanted to wait until we had these clinical trials in place and some publications there before we presented this with the world, which is another reason why you haven't heard about us, right? Because it takes a huge amount of time, effort, money. And we're all about transparency and authenticity. We want to bring integrity back to spirituality, to God, because this is a big mission. And we don't want there to be any flaws, any issues with it, right? Any lack of transparency. We want to represent the data correctly. And so I'm willing to admit if I represent it wrong, I'm willing to go back and correct myself to do whatever is needed for the sake of transparency and authenticity, because I feel it's so vitally important and the message is so big that even if it's my own impediment and inability to deliver the right message, I'm happy to even take myself out of the equation. That's how important this is, I feel, for the world.
Dahryn, let's talk about trauma. We know trauma isn't just about memory. Trauma lives in our body, in our cells, right? And can a blessing reach to that level, you know, in that depth where trauma can be healed?
Absolutely. In fact, like that's one of the premise of our clinical trials is people who have severe trauma, severe mental and emotional health problems. Okay. But I like to just give an overview of what trauma is exactly. Trauma is usually when either we've suppressed our emotions or the world, something in some situation, another person or circumstance has forced our emotions to become suppressed, right? We've been forced to live in an emotional reality that we're uncomfortable with. That's essentially what trauma is. So, you know, one example of trauma, and you can see how trauma is reflected from different levels of consciousness. Most psychologists, if you talk to them, they'll say trauma lingers for the rest of your life, right? You can maybe improve the degrees by which you experience it or live with it, reframe it for yourself, give it different context. But a lot of psychologists believe that even with, you know, dosing on drugs and therapy and all these things, trauma continues till you die. That's what a lot of psychologists and scientists firmly believe. Trauma is so residual, it goes down to your very DNA, your genetics, your core of who you are. And they found out they even pass on experiences and likings and dislikings and things genetically to your children. So you can pass trauma down genetically as well, right? Aversions and likings and dislikings, all of that is genetically passed down. So trauma is very severe, and people underestimate the influence of emotions and our mental state on our physical well-being as well. It is such a big influencing factor. There's a real reason why there is a mind-body connection, right? And so trauma, when you look at it from a lower level of consciousness, I give this example where you take a woman, right, who, you know, was absolutely in love with this man, right? And they had a wonderful relationship. And we've applied this realistically too with real human testimonials. So these are real examples. This is just a story though. You take a woman who's been rejected suddenly out of nowhere. They've lived together, loved each other for years, right? And suddenly he says, I don't love you anymore. We're mismatched, right? He rejects, says, you know, I hate you, everything about you, right? Completely rejected, throwing this woman on the street. This woman's living with trauma now. Right? And this trauma is everything. It manifests as mental restlessness, you know, like poor quality sleep, you know, poor energy. Their whole metabolic system is in havoc. Their, you know, anxiety, depression, you know, it's a whole host of problems. Menstrual problems start to arise from all of that. You have all these situations that arise from this traumatic experience. This woman starts to doubt her value, her self-worth, right? Loses inspiration, motivation, wants to just lay in bed and rot, right? As this term goes, all of that, right? That's from a lower level of consciousness. From a higher level of consciousness, we've seen this. We've seen people who leave relationships even with the blessing. And what happens is, as a result, when this relationship separates, even if they're rejected, they don't suffer from the complex of the rejection. What happens as a result is they're at peace with it. They're okay. Instead, how they take it, how they internalize it, how their mind takes it in, right? And facilitates it within their being and gives it the framework within them without them having to do anything on their own, without them having to, like give themselves positive affirmations and work themselves up. They automatically reframe it as, this is good for me. This is something that's beneficial. Nothing wrong happened. This is actually, this relationship was not good for me. They were toxic. This is bad. This is actually the grace of God working in my life. My soulmate is out there. I'm being taken care of. Everything's good. Their confidence is higher. Their self-worth is higher. They feel more appreciated and valued afterwards. It's like trauma takes a different, direction. It's like kicked out of their lives and instead something else takes root. Right. And it builds their confidence and their motivation. And they go out and they usually find their soulmate, somebody that's a better match for them, better destiny. So we've seen this reflected in the clinical trials as well. And so what we've done is, for several of our clinical trials, right, I told you 3 of them were conducted remotely. And in these same clinical trials, they were the same ones that were double blinded. So we didn't know, investigators didn't know, so no bias with them picking, the cherry picking data from different groups of people. And even the recipients who received the blessing didn't know they were getting a blessing. We had a psychological group who thought they were getting a blessing from a fake healer, a fake guru, right? So we could eliminate psychological data, and a control group that didn't receive anything, right? And we're measuring at 0, day 90, and day 180. So over a long period of time, right? We're talking like half a year here. And then on top of that, we're only blessing twice and all done remotely. So on day 0, after we measure their baseline data, right? And then at day 90, right, to check improvements. And we're measuring during all 3 of those, interaction periods. And we're measuring things as well as like psychological assessments from a third-party clinical, psychologist who's licensed for this kind of work, who's licensed to eliminate subjective data and try and get to the root cause of psychological trauma and issues. And these people are coming to us with severe mental and emotional health problems, like anything from PTSD, emotional trauma, sadness, suicidal tendencies, depression, right? And, issues that reflect low libido, poor menstrual wellness, low quality of sleep, right? And, fatigue, all these things that are just kind of reflected. They also have poor relationships, issues with their finances, all of these things that contribute or are affected by mental and emotional well-being. Right. So we're taking all of these, doing, a very extensive psychological analysis before and after and during the whole protocol. And on top of that, we're measuring something called the NIH Toolbox for Cognition and Motor Function, which is implemented by the National Institutes of Health for all clinical trials for anybody who wants to, approve or test the efficacy of a specific, therapy or drug. Usually it's there to determine if there are any adverse effects on cognition and motor function, because we've never seen really overall improvements. It's usually there to measure if there's something wrong with a drug or therapy, to see if there's something adversive, like if chemotherapy is worth it for the type of cancer we're treating, because it affects your, whole body as well. So we're measuring those kind of parameters. And in cognition, motor function, we're measuring everything from memory, executive function, language skills, and then for motor function, we're measuring things like locomotion, dexterity, standing balance, endurance, right? A bunch of different parameters for both, right? And then what we're doing is these toolboxes for cognition and motor function was developed by the National Institutes of Health as the gold standard, because it eliminates psychological and subjective data from the analysis. It's a completely randomized test, so it eliminates biases from both the participant and the investigator. It's completely randomized. You don't know what question will be asked, what test will be done next, what exactly will be a part of the test. Everything's randomized, and it's controlled and operated by the server within the National Institutes of Health in the United States. And once it's locked in there, you can't go back and change it. So the moment an answer is in there, you can't manipulate the data. So it's the gold standard, very legitimate, for very high profile clinical trials. All of these have used this type of testing. And it's been conducted and implemented since 2012.
Okay.
Right. So we've used the same protocol for these people, and we've found in every single tested parameter for the NIH Toolbox for Cognition and Motor Function about near 100% improvement across every single tested parameter.
100%.
Nearly 100% improvement across the board. Right. They only see usually adverse effects or no effects. Okay. Right. No adverse effects, no adverse events, they call.
Tell me something. How much time does it take for a blessing to pass?
Moments. like a minute or two.
And I can see the effect immediately.
So the effect takes time, right? Now, what a lot of people report immediately, and this matches with like what your physiology and everything does, we like to say, you know, most people will experience good quality sleep on that night, that very same night, right? People who have issues with insomnia, poor quality sleep issues, they're unable to have a proper night's sleep in years, right? The people, one person, a very high profile client came to us for that exact reason. They were suffering from huge anxiety disorder, unable to sleep properly at night. Just one blessing in that night, he said the anxiety vanished and he slept like a baby, woke up more refreshed than he ever had in his entire life. Yeah. Right? That can happen with one blessing. Yeah. Everybody's different. I like to remind everybody, you're all different. Everybody comes from different paths in life, different levels of deterioration, different problems. But there's one solution for all those problems, and I like to say it's evolving your consciousness. So depending upon your current level of consciousness and where you need to go to resolve those problems, it's a longer journey or a shorter journey. But some of these effects are reflected more faster, more immediately than others. Those being like your quality of sleep within a couple weeks at most is reflected usually almost immediately, right? Your quality of your skin, most people find after 2 weeks of time, because it takes 2 weeks for your cells to turn over completely in your skin, you see that you have a healthy glow on complexion, a more even skin tone, healthy glow about you. You start to observe that
medication, nothing, just a blessing, right?
These people in the clinical trial, they never changed their lifestyle. They did nothing different. They just got the blessing. Okay. Right? And so we're saying, observing people, one of the biggest things that people experience is mental calmness and peace almost immediately, right? Within a few days, even from the blessing. Happiness. They feel content, satisfied, right? These things manifest a lot quicker, a lot faster. And then the other things, if there's severe degeneration, I like to say everybody runs on a spectrum, like -100, 0, and +100. If you're at -5, you'll probably see +5 sooner than somebody on -100, right? And so part of the process is reversing the deterioration, which, by the way, there's not a lot of drugs or therapies out there that can reverse deterioration once it's happened. They can manage and maintain, prevent maybe some things from getting worse, but a lot of it is management. Yeah. A lot of things don't reverse. We've seen reversal where people actually experience like anti-aging, right? More bioavailability. In our clinical trial, we've seen that people absorb nutrition better. They absorb more nutrition from their food. They detoxify. They have better insulin sensitivity, right? They have better cholesterol levels. They have better biomarkers. Inflammation, you said 95%, right? Yeah, yeah. You don't see that result.
But don't you think somewhere it's psychology also? Like, if I know I want to get better, and if I'm going to you to, you know, seek these blessings, and you're giving me blessings, so already it's in my mind, it's in my psychology, okay, something good is going to happen, something, you know.
That's why we have the placebo group, the psychological group. In every clinical trial, we have a placebo psychological group for people who think they're getting a blessing, who people think something's good going to happen to them. These results, this 685% improvement in clotho, this improvement in oxytocin and dopamine and vitamin nutrient absorption, like 50% improvement, 30%, 90%, 95% reduced inflammation, right? All of these things are in comparison to the placebo and the control. Okay. That's not like the placebo group I'm talking about. Those results, I agree, they'll have some kind of influence and some minimal impact you will see reflected, which is why we have that as a protocol in order to eliminate subjective placebo data. So the results we're getting is what's happened when you compare it even to a psychological group. Okay. You get that much more efficacy from the treatment.
Okay. See, our generation is not rejecting God. Our generation is rejecting the middleman. You know, right? The middleman who is in between.
They should.
Who is in between the God and us. So, what makes you different? What is the difference between you and the other people who are like putting themselves out between us and the divine? What is the difference?
Well, it's simply my level of consciousness, right? I've had my own journey. I've evolved my consciousness through my guru's blessings and nurturing. So I had a direct connection, right? So I was able to facilitate and speed up my process faster than most people because of my connection to my guru, right? He helped facilitate, speed up that. But I would also say on top of that, what really makes us a better conductor for this energy, this applies to everybody, right, is something called the divine principles and fundamentals. right? It's what maintains your purity and your innocence. That's what makes you a better conductor for this energy, right? You become a superconductor the more innocent and pure you are. I like to say I led my life with God as my goal and God as my love. So for me, I felt like my life began with that purity and I was able to maintain it and hold it, which is why my evolution happened so quickly. Right? I kind of had that background, that substrate already set for me. But other people who maybe are not like that, right? There's a certain teaching that we like to say where, you know, again, I'm talking about there's something absolute that exists beyond us, right? And so there's a certain set of rules in place, you could say, or laws, or just way and order in which the world works. There's a divine order that operates and governs our existence, right? There are ways that we conduct ourselves in our lives that works for our evolution or against it, right? There are certain ways that we behave, certain thoughts we think, certain people we have around us, certain circumstances, right? Thoughts, behaviors, feelings, all of these things, right? That come from lower levels of consciousness. You see things like hypocrisy, betrayal, you know, dishonesty, selfishness, those kinds of qualities. Those are embodiments. Those are reflections, emanations of lower states of consciousness. Now, what happens from that lower state, right? If you're evolving yourself, if you're getting these blessings, for example, right? You're going to evolve into higher states of consciousness. You will naturally reflect without having to force yourself, right, to embody or reflect these changes. You will become more empathetic. You'll become more compassionate. But if you already have those characters within you, then naturally you become like a superconductor. I like to give an example of an iron bar versus a magnetic iron bar. You have an iron bar, the atoms are haphazard, they're everywhere, right? That's what makes up an iron bar. What makes a magnetic iron bar magnetic is that the atoms within the molecules, they're very much in discipline with each other. They're aligned. What are they aligned with? They're not aligned with the iron bar. They're aligned with magnetic energy. A magnetic iron bar doesn't produce magnetic energy, doesn't generate it, it harnesses it. So magnetic iron bar, when these atoms are aligned, they allow these channels or these pathways for this magnetic energy to flow through it, and it creates this field of magnetism. In the same way, if we discipline ourselves with the fundamentals of life, basically this is the implementation of higher consciousness in action. It's the implementation. It's how consciousness is reflected from higher states, which is sacrifice, caring, empathy. When we embody these characters and we implement them in our lives, we are working towards our evolution. When you embody those poor characters, you make those bad decisions, you think those bad thoughts, you have those bad relationships, right? You're actually working against your evolution. You're working against the same program and function that consciousness has, because consciousness, its whole purpose is to organize and evolve. And we're working against the very system that organizes and evolves us when we're participating in those kinds of activities in our life. And sometimes it's not even like a bad intention, right? The intention is good, but the way you conduct ourselves, there are ways that that make us feel more energized, that give us more energy, or make us feel disconnected, make us feel like we've lost something. So I mean, that's a way, that's part of what we nurture here too, is like how you can evolve yourself faster with this energy, but also how you can sustain that connection, right? Make it permanent.
So one last question I have today is, let's talk about women's health. 30% of women's, all of us go through menstrual problems, PCOD, PCOS. Modern medicines are still arguing about the basics of female biology, right? So how does spirituality and consciousness see this about a female's body, and how does this help us?
So females are a very unique category. I like to say they're actually very good conductors of this energy. They're unusually receptive, right, to these divine blessings, even more so than men, I'd like to say, depending on the consciousness of the men, of course. But they're unusually highly receptive. So when we look at a woman's nature, right, if you look at what science and medicine has disregarded, that's been women. We have been disregarded, misdiagnosed,
What is science ignoring here?
Because all the science studies in the past, what they've been conducted on? Male bodies. There are distinct differences between a male and a female body. Right? Huge differences in hormones, system regulation, everything, even our own bladders, right? The size of our organs, the way they're connected and operate, everything's different about us, right? And the sensitivity, right? We go through cycles. Men are more linear. We go through cycles. We ebb and flow. We follow pathways that nature follows, right? We are probably more sensitive and in tune with nature than the average man is, right? That is our gift as well as our highest detriment. But as a result, because science, that's why they're the biggest, consumer of the wellness industry, because they've been ignored for so long, right? We haven't conducted enough studies on women to truly understand them. So our physiology and our health was assumed. Our physiologies were always assumed by science and medicine. It was never affirmed. It was never studied or investigated properly. We were treated as men with breasts, and that's not the truth at all, right? We're very distinctly different.
Yeah.
So we've been vitally misunderstood. And whenever you go to a doctor, right, you give them a problem you're facing, they're always said that's normal, or just being a woman, or, they find a problem with anything. We're considered overly sensitive, too emotional, right? All these things are attributed to women. And while they are emotional, they are sensitive, but that's an intelligence. That's highly misunderstood by our society that does not appreciate it properly. That emotion and that intelligence, it is our very gift, and it is what makes us such good receivers and such good growers with this energy. Right? Because what is this sensitivity? It's an inherent intelligence that lives in every single woman. That's why you say a woman's intuition is so strong, where she can feel the mood in a room before somebody else can, right? She can understand what's happening with her children from the other side of the world, right? There are certain things a woman just picks up on very easily. If you look at ecosystems worldwide, what are the I guess, animals or creatures that collapse first when an ecosystem collapses? It's the most sensitive beings that collapse first, right? When you see an ecosystem fail, you see, frogs die off first.
Okay.
Right? Because they absorb toxicity more, right? There's something about the frog's physiology where they're more sensitive to toxicity. It reflects more, they die off faster. Okay. So they reflect a failing ecosystem first. Same thing with butterflies. You see, before food chains unravel, butterflies die. Right? It shows a lack of diversity in our ecosystem and in our environment. It shows that there's a failure somewhere in the chain, in the food chain. All of these things are starting to fail. Same way, if you look at women's health and what women are going through, women are more likely than men, much more likely to have a mental and emotional health problem diagnosable. Right? And at the same time, if you look at the number of women with menstrual wellness problems and menopause problems, we could say the number is like 30% of diagnosed with like endometriosis, PCOS, those kinds of problems. But if you look at the actual statistically reported number of women who have things like heavy bleeding, who have like severe cramping, emotional mood swings, all these things that we're taught are normal as children and born and raised with as being normal. Like it's normal to have a heavy bleeding period for 10 days with no pain or a huge pain, right? Mood swings, or it could be 2 days, it could be 6 days. We don't know the number because it's so volatile. We can't predict what it will be for everybody. Right? If you look at the people who have pain and issues with their menstrual cycle and menopause, 75% of women, 75% of women, they all have issues with their menstrual cycle and their menopause. Right? These are natural, normal cycles women go through. It's not pathology. It's not a disorder. It's not a disease. These are things that nature designed for us. These should be very natural and easy to go through. Right? In the same way childbirth is intuitive and natural, these same things. We're seeing fertility rates, right, decline as well. Huge infertility, issues worldwide. We're seeing that at more time than ever, women are suffering. And you see, other cultures, women are gaining their independence, their empowerment and everything, and women are still the greatest sufferers on this planet.
True.
Right? And so what we're seeing is they are like a thermometer. They are a reflector. They are receivers. So what does that mean? That means they're a great measure for abundance, for growth, for prosperity, as well as a great measure for detriment and toxicity. Our environment, our world, our mental health, everything is in such severe levels of toxicity. We have put such distress on women and their bodies and their minds. They're like the thermometers, the temperature of the environment. When it's getting too hot, women reflect it first. So we're reflecting the state of humanity first with all of these huge problems. It's reflecting our food crisis, the toxicity in our food. Right? It's reflecting our mental health crises. It's reflecting everything. We're the first embodiment of it. Right? And also we're the first to resolve when things get better. We're the first to reflect the good. right? We're probably the greatest receivers because of that sensitivity. So what women are showing now in this day and age is the state of our food, it's the state of our environment, it's the amount of toxic chemicals that we're using in our food. Because if you look at menstrual wellness, part of what estrogen is metabolized, it's metabolized within our gut. Our whole microbiomes are thrown off because of all the toxic chemicals. We need a solution without them. Yeah. Science is dependent upon them. We can't produce. We're at the risk of losing crops without using these chemicals, right? We're killing off our soil. We're depleting our soil, ruining our groundwater, ruining our air, right? You go to India, you can't even breathe. It's so toxic, the air pollution here. I hear everybody coughing the moment I arrive. It's like our environment has deteriorated rapidly because we're not understanding how to make these things happen through other means. Yeah. Right. And then as a result, right, we're also seeing the mental health epidemic. We're seeing mental health, right? Suicide rates, all these things, huge influx. Especially we see that with the younger generation, suicidal tendencies are increasing. Their mortality rates are higher. When we're talking about longevity in life and the mortality rates going down in first world countries, what we're seeing is the youths are the ones that are dying, not the older generation, because they're killing themselves.
Yeah, depression and anxiety.
Depression is so huge that people don't want to live on this planet anymore. Correct. That's how bad life is here. Yeah. And so right, women are reflectors of this. And we've seen that with the clinical trials, all of the women with this blessing, all of their mental health problems completely resolved. Okay. Everything reported. Okay. Right? Heavy bleeding, emotional problems, right? Poor fatigue and right? All these issues that they have completely resolved by the end of the clinical trial. Yeah. And we've reported this number in over 300,000 people, like more than half of them women, because more of our clients are women than men, right? Because they experience the effects so dramatically. They experience it, completely resolutely. And so, they are great receivers for this energy, but they are the greatest indicators of a world in havoc, and they are the greatest implications that we have to show the effects of what this energy can do as women.
So, Dahryn, we have come to end of our conversation, but I would like you to tell our audience, like, how can they connect to you? How can they connect with Divine Connection? How can they get in touch? And if someone, for example, a 22-year-old boy or a girl who's like just a burnt out kid, going through depression, anxiety, or a woman going through a lot of problems in her life, people going through, many things in their relationships or financial loss, many things when we talk about, right? So what is the process? How can they get in touch with you? How can they get the blessing, if you can tell our audience?
Well, everything's available on our website, divineconnection.org. It's a nonprofit organization, right? It's a multifaceted mission. So you can read all about our mission objectives, everything there. Our science research is there. It's completely transparent, available for everybody to read, all of our publications, as well as we have our testimonials available. We have like hundreds of recorded and written testimonials from people reporting miraculous changes in their lives, right? All this is on our website. You can see our science research on places like Google Scholar. You can go to probably any university library and find our research there as well, at least find some of our publications available there as well. But all of our memberships, if people want to try just one blessing, we offer single blessings or whole memberships where people attend workshops and receive the blessings and a whole variety of different things. But essentially, when they join a membership, they're joining this mission. They're helping us grow the mission. They're helping contribute to the mission so that they can help further our work and our mission. They can help, fund it in a way and then participate and be a part of this, because this is a worldwide thing. Yeah. And like I said before, it's like this is such an essential part. Like, the reason why 50% of the youths, at least in America, have left religion and, started, revering science or kind of being a little more, open-ended to different topics or ideas. It's because of the incapabilities of, religion and as well as spirituality, right? And even science now, to properly, demonstrate real outcome in their lives, right? And they've relied on science and technology. And so I truly feel that if we want this to be mainstream, and if the youth, if all of us will adopt it in our lives, it will become a big, worldwide proportionate thing, then what will happen is that we really need to demonstrate outcome. And I feel like we are successfully doing that. We've done that with our 6,000 science studies, right? 300,000 people have experienced the blessing. We have incredible research and testimonials, and we have so many people that constantly are receiving blessings for the first time and, reporting extraordinary outcomes in their relationships, finances, health, well-being, mental peace, clarity, decision-making ability, everything. Their whole life changes. So when you realize the lack of answers out there, and everything has reached a certain limit, a certain impasse on our paths, right? And you see that spirituality does have something to offer us, and that is through divine connection, what our organization is called, Divine Connection International.
Correct.
When you find that the answers are coming from there, it's kind of like the outcome will speak for itself. And I truly feel that that's happening now, and I'm happy to share it with you on this podcast. Thank you for having me here. I'm so grateful.
Thank you so much for sharing this knowledge with us, and people can get in touch with you, to experience this magic and to get these divine blessings. So thank you
Phone
again.
number, email,
Yeah,
we have
everything
mailing
is
lists, all of it's
available.
available there.
Yeah,
So please go there.
do your research. You trust what Dahryn is saying, and trust yourself also after doing the research.
Yes.
The trial papers are available, the research papers are available outside in the public domain, and then you can reach out to them.
Please do.
Yeah. Again, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.